Okay, we are back here 48 hours later since our Friday previews here on Sunday night. We're going to recap college football playoff committee, some of the games. Of course, disappointing for you, Mr. Paisley. Something that was in the back of our minds for a couple of weeks on the situation with Miami, with Notre Dame, with Alabama, with all these other teams, BYU, how this would close out. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning in, listening. We'll probably keep a couple more podcasts go throughout the playoff itself and preview some of those games. But Paisley, I imagine it wasn't the best day. We talked a little bit this morning of the chance, but we really thought they would probably keep Notre Dame in just based off of last year and some of the precedent. Definitely a little bit of a surprise for some people seeing that late switch here at the 13th hour.
Yeah, a lot to get into. We'll get to that a little bit later in the pod here, Case. But yeah, definitely disappointing. We knew it had to be one of the teams, and somebody was going to be left really unhappy. And yeah, I think we both would agree we were not expecting this from leaving Notre Dame out. But the committee just wakes up and chooses whatever they want to do on that given day, and that's decides the fate of these college football teams, which is really sad for all the players and coaches that give a lot of time into it, and then it's left up to 12 or 14 bozos that have no idea what they're watching and what to break down and stuff. So we'll get into all that, but it had to happen to one of the teams. Unfortunately, it happened to Notre Dame. But, I think, like, weirdly enough, Case, I think this could cause a lot of good change to maybe hopefully come in college football. Really just strip down everything and change everything, even going to the calendar with these coaches leaving. Like, there is so much needs to get changed. And maybe this year and the chaos and the craziness of it, and leaving out like such a big brand like Notre Dame and the controversy with it will maybe ignite some change here. So that's what I'm hoping about going forward here, looking to the future, but definitely disappointing if you're a Notre Dame fan.
We'll do this episode. We'll break out just really quickly. We'll go over our records from just this past week. We'll jump right into the bracket, go over some of the rankings, just more of a conversational style on the college football playoff. With that, we'll probably mix in the game recap. So maybe if we talk about a team, we could break down on just what happened. I mean, everybody listening, I'm sure you know all the results. If you found our podcast, I'm sure you're pretty good with your college football stuff. So we don't have to get crazy with that stuff. And then at the end, we might do what we got right this season and wrong in the preseason. Paisley and I went over some of our teams of who we thought would be surprise teams, conference championships teams, all that type of stuff. And then at the very end, we'll do our winners and losers per usual. We'll try to keep this thing right around 60 minutes as the goal, maybe less. But anyway, with that being said, a week in the books. I thought I went 0 for 7, as I was just telling Jared when I checked my sheet, but I did go 1-6. Not a great week. I just missed across the board. I'm not gonna lie, I was not confident in some of these picks. I had no idea. My worst pick's probably BYU with 12.5. I felt like that was my gut should have just rolled with Texas Tech on the blowout. Kind of thought it would be difficult to beat, a team twice, and that maybe BYU would fight like they're on the, the verge of the playoff, but they just came out, laid an egg, got blown out. Honestly, we don't even have to touch on that game again. We could talk about it now, but BYU wins easily. Also was on Alabama for the first time. Pace, you got one good on me there. Alabama really let me down. They didn't look good. They have been leaking oil for weeks, it seems now. And I think it's now, of course, right when we're getting in the playoff, they get in, and it seems like they're kind of playing their worst football of the season, like right at the end. So they are just on three wheels here getting into the playoff. So wrong on them. James Madison, hey, good for them. They made their way to the playoff, but did not cover the 24.5 against Troy. Thought they'd blow them out more. They won easily, but 24.5, I guess, was a lot of points for that game. Duke over Virginia, that kind of threw even more chaos at this whole committee thing. UVA really just absolute laying an egg when it mattered most. And the ACC champion is not in the playoffs. So tell me how that, that shouldn't happen. And I'm not saying Duke should be in, but I'm saying we should not be in a position where the ACC champion is 8-5 is what I'm saying. Ohio State, we know what happened there. Probably the best game all weekend. Was a great game. Good for Indiana. A kind of a stunner for me. I didn't really I wasn't there on Indiana. I guess I am now, but more of I think this field's wide open really. And then the only win I got, which was a backdoor win. Ohio State -2.5 on the first half. So they were up 10-6, got that one. But not a great week for betting wise, Paisley, but certainly my spirits are probably a little bit higher than yours at the moment, just everything going on.
Yeah, it actually was a pretty fun conference championship week, even though the games, aren't meaning a lot. Like we said, some more than others, obviously. But yeah, the JMU game was weird. They were really dominating the box score, but they just couldn't really get out to a big lead. It was really clunky early on, and then they kind of put away late. And then they actually had a chance. They were on the 20-yard line. They took some knees at the end instead of running it up the score to look to cover that 24.5. So that was disappointing. Boise State quietly had a nice end of the season. They really crushed UNLV at home there, dominating that matchup. So good for Boise State there. Obviously not as good as they were last year, but a nice little finish to the season. North Texas, like you said, tough one. That was our team all year. We were riding high with them, and I really liked them in the matchup, but they were so sloppy, and it kind of looked very similar to that South Florida game. So that was very upsetting there for the lock there. I really liked them in that game, but Tulane played really good. Interested to see how Tulane goes. I think they have obviously a better chance than JMU to, maybe keep it a game or pull off the upset going against Ole Miss down there in Oxford. But the Tulane just played really solid. North Texas was so sloppy and counter. Not like that. The Kennesaw Jacksonville State was a good game. Kennesaw got out to a big lead, and then Jacksonville State came back. Kennesaw ended up winning it, but the over was not even close. That was another one that I was just way off on. Just very confusing, some of these finals, and it's kind of been like that all year as we've been breaking down recaps. Like we feel like we have a good beat on some of these games, and they just pan out not even close to what we were expecting. Western Michigan was really my really good call today on the locks there. Got the win there, really dominated that game from start to finish. So shout out the Broncos there and the MAC. Finally we won on Georgia. Finally took all season, but Georgia did beat Alabama. I finally got one right, picking against Alabama, and might be going against them again in the playoff matchup against Oklahoma like I did the first time, but we'll get to that in a couple of weeks when we break that down. And then the under in the Ohio State-Indiana game, like you said, definitely a little shocker. And I was leaning Indiana. I wish I was more confident with it. I did end up taking in real life, but didn't pull the trigger on the page here. But kind of going back to my point about Ohio State, I just didn't fully get it. We talk about scheduling and all that, but people don't really want to talk about a team like Ohio State or Texas Tech, and we'll get into this a little bit later with some hypotheticals, but they really didn't play anybody all season. So they really have not been tested since week one. I thought Indiana came out and really punched them in the mouth right away, kind of got them off their rhythm. Julian Sayin was getting pressured all night, something he was not used to. They couldn't really get the receivers involved. So the under really played into that. I felt like that was the only call really that I had that really played into it from start to finish, never really in doubt there. And Indiana did enough to move the ball. I thought they ran the ball really good against an Ohio State run defense that definitely was getting a little leaky there in some of their matchups, but you couldn't really see it overall because just the competition they played wasn't that great. So that's something to keep in mind with Ohio State, and we'll break all these teams down that made the playoffs in the next couple of weeks. But their offensive line kind of got dominated a little bit, I felt, against Indiana, and then their D-line, could really rush the passer and get after it, but they really weren't great in run support. So really going to be matchup dependent. Some of the first round matchups aren't the most enticing, but then once you get into those second rounds, I think that's when we're going to see some really great matchups and some fireworks. So Ohio State, it's kind of similar to last year. I feel like people are selling them now. Can they still make a run? They're obviously still very, very talented, but I was kind of saying that all year, Case. I just didn't think they were as good or as talented as last year with all the weapons they had and everything. So I wouldn't bank on them just, turning on the Jets here and then cruise into a national title like they did last year. But I still think obviously you could find some value because now they are dinged down a little bit after that Indiana game. So they're going to be a team I'm very interested to see how they look in their after their bye playing their first or second round matchup.
Yeah, Ohio State's been here before. We know about their loss against Michigan last year and then being able to respond and come out and win the national championship. So we'll see how they respond. Indiana, I was impressed with. I thought Ohio State was going to have more success offensively. I thought between Sayin and their receivers, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, even just using those receivers to get their running game going. I thought Ohio State was going to be able to move the ball more and win the game. Game itself was odd. It felt like Ohio State was in control for a lot of it, and then just kind of Indiana got a couple big plays late third quarter. Was able to take the lead, and then we all know about the missed field goal. Surprised on the call. I probably would have went for it. I don't understand why, but definitely Ryan Day regrets that decision now. I swear, he seems like he makes the right decision 95% of the time. And Ohio State, very good coaching staff, like definitely the best of the best analysts. I mean, across their coaching staff, and that was a surprise. And almost like at that point, I was listening to a podcast this morning that when that decision was made before even the field goal, it was like, we're going to lose this game. Even if Ohio State ties it there, it's like Ryan Day is like scared right now. They're going to, they're in big trouble here. But, I don't want to pick it apart too much. I mean, Indiana's number one now, according to the polls. So definitely Ohio State's got everything in front of them. But my biggest takeaway is I think Indiana, they could really win a national championship, which is crazy to say out loud. But they beat Ohio State, so I don't know who else they really can't beat.
Yeah, no, I think you really got to start with the Indiana defense. I think that's a great place to give them a shout out because they played really well. And I was actually surprised too. When I took the under, that was my only thing. I thought, well, they could really get carved up here. And Ohio State could just put up like 35 of their own and really get this game over the total. But once I saw them really controlling it in the first and second quarter, obviously they buckled down the red zone. Like you said, Ohio State was moving the ball pretty efficiently, just had some blunders there in the red zone. That tush push that he was getting dragged for 3 yards on the ground. Didn't really watch his Jalen Hurts tape there to see that one. But yeah, there was just that field goal call. That first, and with the field goal kicker, is that the same guy that kicked in the Georgia game? I swear he's been there like 4 or 5 years, or maybe it's similar last names or something, but he has been struggling for them, I think, for a while. And that first field goal that went in, it was going way to the left and it curved back a little bit, just snuck in the left goalpost. And then that second kick looked the same, and then it just completely duck hooked to the left. So that's going to be something to keep your eye on with Ohio State too, because I think that's that same kicker, the Fielding, that was having trouble a couple of years ago in that Georgia game. So definitely something that is maybe going to change Ryan Day's mind. But like you said, you got to be aggressive all the time. Don't go for a couple times and then kick the field goal. Like he was just kind of, I think, confusing himself a little bit. But when it's fourth and that short, I think the analytics would have said to go there. And I'm a very aggressive, really put your offense out there, be aggressive and lose that way. And then once they kicked it and missed it, it kind of just really took the sail out of the Buckeyes there.
Overall, Paisley, we end the season, regular season and conference championship, a little bit below 500. You had a better year than I did as a Page. 261 wins, 279 losses, 11 push. So we're still within striking distance of getting close to 50 between all the bowl games and playoff, games and national championships. Probably would have to almost bet on every game or get creative with it. But not a bad year. I mean, definitely could have been a lot worse. I should say I think normally we've been over 50 for most of the years, so this might be the first time we're below. I can't remember our record last year. I'm sure we have it here on the document, but more so disappointed in the locks. That was disappointing. 26 wins all year, 35 losses. So it's funny to say, but if we were reversed on all of our locks, we'd be that almost 60%.
Yeah, it was a frustrating year to say the least, and that's where I thought the information, the analysis we broke down was pretty solid. And when we were right, we crushed it. Like some of these were no sweats, absolutely no sweats. And then was the inverse. Like it was just a lot of volatility. A lot of, if it was wrong by like 20, 30 points. So it was just a weird year in college football. But, you got to keep the process the same year in and year out. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we haven't been below 50% as a Page, combining both our records here. So definitely a little bit of an off year this year. But, we're going to keep battling. Still got bowl season, and it was definitely a one-off. So we'll just keep grinding away as we go forward here.
Yeah, and as always, our listeners, you could take a look at the X page. We put our picks up every week. We score them. We haven't done a great job putting out all of our results weekly, showing what we got right and wrong, but they're all public on there, so you could look at it yourself. We have our records as well posted. With that, Paisley, might as well get right into it. College football playoff was announced this morning. We all thought we knew there was going to be some controversy for sure between, of course, mostly Notre Dame, Miami, and Alabama. I'm going to list out the quick teams. I'll kind of give my initial thoughts, and then I'll just kick it to you to take away. But no surprise up top. We got Indiana and Ohio State. They flipped 1-2. Indiana wins the Big Ten. There was some people that thought maybe it would go Indiana, Georgia, then Ohio State, rewarding the SEC champion. But when they put Ohio State, that was my first indication. And they announced it like 10 minutes earlier. I hate, by the way, the stupid rollout thing, but regardless, that's a whole nother topic. just the show is awful. But when I saw that, I immediately thought Alabama would be in, because I was like, all right, they're not moving Ohio State at all. They're not giving Georgia anything over them. Like, Alabama's probably safe. I at that point figured they weren't going to knock any conference champion down. So then we got Texas Tech 4, no surprise. The rest we all know them: Oregon, Ole Miss, A&M, Oklahoma, rounding out the top 8. Alabama staying at 9, not moving at all, despite losing by 3 touchdowns to Georgia. And then the big change right here: they moved BYU. They moved. So it was Notre Dame, BYU, Miami. They flip it to Miami, Notre Dame, BYU now. So they moved BYU back. That was the big thing. They moved BYU back 2 spots. Notre Dame, Miami are next to each other. They, decide to go with the head-to-head Miami over Notre Dame. If this was kind of known 2-3 weeks ago, if Alabama or if Miami was already, above Notre Dame, I think there would be a lot less pushback on it. They would just be citing the head-to-head. But the fact is, the committee for 3 weeks had a couple spots in front or behind Notre Dame as kind of like a safety cushion. It seemed like it was clear that they thought they were the better team. And then every time they were asked, well, what about the head-to-head? The answer was, well, they're not, 100% comparable. So we think Notre Dame's a better team. So we're not going to, honor that. And by the way, let's roll back the tape almost 10 years. The year Penn State beat Ohio State in 2016, the rankings final was Ohio State 4, Penn State 5. And even though as a Penn State fan, we had the head-to-head, it was, well, we think there's a actual gap there. We think Ohio State's much better. Penn State had a bad loss to Pittsburgh that year. Ohio State didn't really have any bad losses, just the one at Penn State. So that stuff has happened. This completely different. They decide to fall to the pressure, it seems, or what. They drop BYU in the conference championship, which was a surprise because I thought maybe they'd keep that gap. That was my argument a week ago. I said, well, they'll keep Notre Dame in, and I said it on here because I think they'll keep BYU between them and Miami, and so then you won't have they're right next to each other anyway. But for some reason, they pushed BYU back. They got blown out, but so did Alabama. So certainly not clear, Paisley, and I'll let you take it here. But Notre Dame out, Miami in, BYU also out, Texas out, Vanderbilt out. And of course, we get the 2 group of 5 teams in because the ACC failed to get their conference champion in, but Miami backdoors their way in. Definitely a mess here on the end of the seeds here, but JMU and Tulane then round out the rest of the field.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that Penn State scenario that happened 8 years ago or so. The committee's been doing this for a long time. I think if Notre Dame would have gotten in, I would have kept the same sentiments I felt on the committee, even going into it. I mean, you had people in the college football business calling them out a couple of weeks ago, even leading up to this final reaction. So this is not like everyone was clamoring them and then just the last week, they messed it up. Like, they've been messing this up for 10 plus years. And, I think it's a great place to start with the conference championships and how they evaluated them. And you can even go back a little bit further because I was doing some digging here before our show started. And Auburn beat Georgia during the regular season when it was the 14 playoff. Then Auburn loses to Georgia in the SEC championship. They dropped 7 spots, and this was in one of the first 14 playoff rankings. Do you want to guess who got that 4th spot, Case? Alabama. So it seems like every year, everyone's always clamor about Notre Dame getting the bias and the favoritism. I think Alabama gets the benefit of the doubt more times than not, or you could just say / the SEC. So even this year, it was just so obvious with the bias. And, we're not going to go full conspiracy theory. It's not what we do here. But it's crazy how Alabama loses by around the same score that BYU loses. They don't drop back at all, and BYU gets dropped back a spot, and they're like, well, it's because they lost their conference championship. Well, that's not the same. And I think something that we're going to be talking about the rest of the show here is a consistency. You can't fault consistency. As long as you're consistent, if you're, doing things year after year the same way, well, then you're not throwing any curveballs, and no one's going to be left out, or no one's going to be left scratching their head being like, wait, what's going on here? So the committee has not been consistent forever. And you even think back to the Florida State where they left them out. But then the year before, they put TCU in because they're more deserving. Then they lost by 50 to Georgia. They put Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl against Oregon, and they lost by 50. And they're like, okay, wait, next year we're going to go best teams. We're not going to go most deserving. So then they screwed over Florida State the next year, and they put Alabama in. And obviously, it was a better game than probably what Florida State did. But I think everyone could agree that wasn't fair. They went undefeated. So the committee's been doing this for a long time. And I think the people who make up the committee are a joke. They really do not know football. They don't know what they're doing. And I think this year, they was doing it week by week. And like you said, Case, I think you broke it down very good. Like, it was week by week since they started these rankings 4 weeks ago that they were changing their mind. And that's something that is not consistent at all. They were moving Notre Dame above Alabama, but then Alabama has a close game against Auburn, does not look good. And then Notre Dame wins by 30 against Stanford, and Alabama jumps them. And now it all makes sense because they were just trying. It's all them just covering their tracks and trying to, set up the next week, or like really try and be like, oh, we can't just be the same thing because it's a TV show. We got to make the drama and all this stuff. And now, like you said, they did it for 4 weeks straight. They had Notre Dame with a significant gap against Miami. So that's where the frustration boils. Like you said, they had to leave one of the teams out, and one of the teams would have been very upset, and it just so happens to be Notre Dame. But the way and the process they did it, and then you talk about the ACC not getting represented, and oh, wait, now they put Miami in because Virginia lost, and they thought Virginia was going to represent the ACC, but the ACC needs to be included. So it was just a complete egg on the face. I feel like we do this every single season with the college football committee here. So I'm really hoping that they change it completely. I hope they get rid of the committee completely, or get members in that actually know what they're doing. Maybe look to more statistical things or stuff like that. I think they're going to wipe away maybe the group of 5 altogether, or maybe just have one, really switch around that. They might go to some playing games. So I will give them that. They are willing to change, obviously, from last year with that blunder too. That's something no one's really talking about too, Case. Oregon was the number 1 seed and won the Big Ten, and they got the worst seed. And they were just like, oh yeah, we'll change it next year. Oregon just maybe lost out a national championship last year because of their mistakes and how they set up the system and everything. So now this year, some teams are getting in, left out, like Notre Dame, that maybe could have made a run and won it all. And now they're just going to throw away that season and be like, oh yeah, we messed up. Like it wasn't really correct that season. So we'll just make it better. Like, you can't just keep switching it every single season, but there's clearly some problems. And if you're changing it every year, you're having this much pushback, there's clearly some fundamental problems. So we could get into maybe in the offseason all the problems of college football. We will directly talk about the playoff and everything here, but it's just a subjective beauty contest. And you look around, there's no other sport that does it, Case. There's no other sport that it's all mathematical, it's all divisions, it's all based out. Everybody's either in a conference, not. And coming from a Notre Dame fan myself, like, I think they should be in a conference, or it's not fair that they're not in a conference. And I know they like to use that to their advantage and stuff, and I don't blame them for not seeing, because no one's forcing them to join a conference, but now maybe they will. It's a mess. College football's been a mess. You've seen on the coaching side with the transfer portal, the coaches leaving. Now the college football, like, you have Kirk Herbstreit calling out that his own show on ESPN is a mess and that it was stupid and it shouldn't be. Like, there is so many problems going on. So this is just a microcosm of all of it. You knew it was going to blow up, like you said, with one of these teams getting left out. It just so happened to be Notre Dame, and it was very frustrating. But we just are looking for consistency. And it just seems like if you complain and if you politic enough for 4 weeks, and if you have the ACC playing the Notre Dame Miami game for 12 hours straight or whatever they did on the ACC network, like, that works apparently. And that seems to work. So throw a temper tantrum, do what you have to do, politic, fly planes overhead of the things, and it'll work, because these people are stupid. They have no backbone in the committee, and they have no consistency year in and year out, and they just switch what they want to do on a weekly basis.
Yeah, well, I think you broke it down well, as in there's no consistency, and that was a good pool there about Auburn dropping 7 spots. I didn't see that, so that is crazy. And also, and we all know this too, and everyone listening, it is such like a Wild West situation that there is no easy fix. Like, you can't. It is going to take probably multiple years, probably multiple variations to come up with a long-term actual solution. And part of the problem is the root cause of just these monster conferences, because you can't have an NFL style type of playoff, because not all the conferences are created equal. So what are we just going to audit? Like, in other words, if we were just going to say conference champions, well, then Duke would be in right now. And nobody wants that. Nobody thought they would be in. So
Right.
it's going to be a multi-facet, issue, way to fix this thing. Um, Biggest red flag for me definitely was a week ago now, looking back, was seeing the Alabama Notre Dame switch. That was weird because I remember being on the podcast maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe I don't know like what you thought that week, but I saw it was the week Oklahoma beat Notre Dame or beat Alabama, and they kept Notre Dame between both of those SEC teams. It was
Mhm.
Oklahoma, then Notre Dame, then Alabama, and I, regardless, even if as a fan of Penn State, I didn't want to see Notre Dame really in the playoff. I thought when I saw that, well, Notre Dame will be in because the committee's sending the message and the ranking. Well, we don't want to have the situation that we ended up with. So I don't know what flipped a week ago. It did seem like they were kind of almost trying to cover the tracks. Like, this would be interesting if it came out, but like if the discussion was we probably are going to make the change, but we don't want to do it now because first we need to like move Alabama above them again and, almost play backwards, which would be wrong if that was the truth. Because they really could have just had have Miami ahead, really for the last couple of weeks, or not have Notre Dame ahead of Alabama and then make the change. Didn't really make any sense. One positive, I guess, even though we have JMU and Tulane in, which is another topic, is if we were under the last year's format. Keep in mind, we would have both of those teams with a bye right now. We'd have Indiana 1, we'd have Georgia 2, we'd have Tulane 3, and James Madison 4. I mean, that would have been like, look, I'm all for giving the group of 5 a chance, and we don't want to make it all about like where there's no group of 5 success. But like we were talking before we started the podcast, like it is extremely rare in any time for one of these teams to have a real national championship caliber type of team. And the way it was designed, I think, was maybe to get one bid, but they gotta. I mean, I would be in favor of just scrapping them completely and having them play their own playoff, having their own group of 5 champion. I really don't think they would be that against it. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's another that would be difficult to do and set up, but like there's got to be a better way. They're not going to win the national championship, so like why are we wasting nearly 15% or whatever it is of the entire playoff with these two teams? Like there's only 12 teams that get in out of 100 and whatever 26 schools, and we have James Madison and Tulane. Like it's a cool story, but it's like when is kind of enough in my like you said it, and we could shift right into this. Like, why would those two teams be in over Notre Dame and Texas per se, or Notre Dame and BYU? Like Notre Dame and BYU or Texas and Vanderbilt are 4 teams that probably could make a run, or maybe could win a game, potentially win a national championship for how wide open it seems. Nobody believes James Madison or Tulane could do that, and I get the auto bid thing. I get what they were trying to do, but I think having 2 of these teams now sneak in just shows that it is broken, and yeah, that's got to change.
Yeah, it was a mess on so many fronts, and yeah, that's another thing that not even is getting much discussion because of the whole Notre Dame topic. But yeah, the fact that they have 2 teams, because they always thought like, oh, there's no way the Power 4 schools are going to be that bad. Where even the ACC, there's no way Florida State or Clemson or Miami are going to drop off and not even play for the conference championship game. So that makes a lot of sense. Let's reward the ACC and put a team in because they were the ones that screwed this all up and couldn't even get a team in the top 25 discussion or like in that realm. So the conferences are too big. I think that's a great place to start, Case, on what you said. The expansion that happened a year ago or 2 years ago, whenever it happened with the Pac-12 dissolving, the ACC might be dissolving now if Notre Dame. Like, there's so much stuff that could happen here and really change. But these conferences are so large. And like you said, you'd like the NFL model because no one has a problem with it. But it's so hard to do that when you have so many teams or so many things. So, there's going to be a ton of hypothetical things, and all these podcasters or college football heads are going to be, I've seen like 4 or 5 different formats of it, and everyone's trying to fix it. So maybe there's not a perfect one out there, but these conferences are way too large because then here's another thing, like Texas Tech or Texas A&M, they played like the 6 bottom teams in the SEC. They didn't have to play Alabama, Georgia. They played Texas later in the year. They didn't play Ole Miss. They didn't play any of the top teams, and they skated by and went undefeated or one loss in the SEC. Didn't have to play in the conference championship game. Easily got in. So what if it was Texas A&M in the conference championship game? They got routed. Like So it's almost, there's so many flaws within the system here, but they're way too big of conferences. We either have to go back to divisions or one side, we play the whole one side, play the whole next side. The tiebreakers need to be consistent, because why is the ACC tiebreaker way different than the Mountain West tiebreaker versus the like? And now when you have all these, there was a 5-way tie for the ACC. That shouldn't be happening. Like, so if you're college basketball or the NBA or the MLB playing 30, 60, 70 games, 100 games, then you could have tiebreakers. But when you're only playing 9 or 8 conference games, there's going to be a ton of 2-loss teams or 1-loss teams. So there's just so many problems here. And maybe this will be the jumpstart for a complete overhaul with everything here. But going back to the group of 5, I think they just didn't think this would ever happen. And now with this happening, with the way the last couple teams went out, you got to, if you're a Texas or Vanderbilt fan or on the coaching staff or the players, you're like, how does that make sense? And I made a joke when we were finishing watching the NFL games today, and they put up the standings and the in the hunt, and they had the Bengals at 4-9, and I was like, so that would be saying oh, the Bengals are in the playoffs and the Bills at 7-4, whatever they are, they're not in, and everyone would be like, how does that make sense? What the hell? And it's this is basically what college football is when you break it down. We have 2 teams that are not even close to going to be able to compete for it. That Boise State team, I think, might be the best team we might ever get out of the group of 5, especially with the way the group of 5 is trending, because they're losing a lot of players that go up to these Power 4 conferences. And they couldn't even hold water against the 5 or 6 seed that was Penn State last year. They were getting outclassed completely. So I just think it's going to be an absolute mess. I think both teams are going to get blown out here in the first round. And it's just really going to show hey, I think we really got to change it. And, I'm a big proponent of the group of 5. I love watching the smaller teams. I love March Madness because it gives the smaller teams hope, and they could always make a Cinderella run, but it's got to be within the reasoning. And that's a great point you brought up about the seeding last year and just how laughable it is. That's literally laughable where it was and everything like that. So that's what we're doing. These are the rules that are being set in place, and it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. There needs to be a lot of change. But yeah, I'm hoping, unless you have a crazy good undefeated or you're top 15, top 10, like Boise State was, I think they were 11 or 12 last year. Okay, then you could compete with the big boys and maybe give it a try. But when you're barely sneaking in the top 25 and you have a couple losses to Power 4 teams, like Tulane played Ole Miss earlier this year and lost by 30. Who wants to see that again? And James Madison. So I feel the pain for Notre Dame, Texas, Vanderbilt, and BYU. Give them a shot. It'd be a lot better. And I think they're going to lose a lot of money and a lot of viewership because it's not that fun and it's not that watchable.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I actually thought that there was a chance that they were going to put Duke in at 24th and then James Madison at 25th. And I was looking at the rankings. They have Iowa sitting at 8-4 right above James Madison. So I thought it was maybe they're going to squeeze Duke in, which would have been another topic. I mean, there's no reason Duke should be in, but I did think, there was a chance, and they obviously got shut down. I'm glad they did, though. I mean, if I have to pick one, team to be disappointing about, I guess I'd rather be Duke than James Madison. At least, we could watch them, I guess. But I do think, though, expansion is on, the horizon. It was rumored before even this year. I think even late last offseason that they were looking to go to 16. I think that's probably a start. It's part of me is a little, disappointed because I think we didn't want it to get to the point where it's so big. But if we do to move to 16, I think I would probably stop it there. I would do something where you have and part of the problem is, all conferences aren't created equal. So my proposition on how I would start to fix college football would be something like the Big Ten's proposal that the SEC I don't think loved, but where you have the top four SEC kind of auto in, the top 4 Big Ten auto in, and then ACC, Big 12 both get 2, and then you have the rest would be at large. So I think that'd be 12. So then you'd have 4 at large, for all your other teams. If the SEC has 5th or 6th or whatever. That would, in other words, automatically BYU would be in. Then you'd have Texas Tech, BYU, and you'd have Ohio State, Indiana, and you'd have Alabama, Georgia. Unfortunately, you would have Duke in that situation, but at least it's not. At least if that happened, you're not really taking away too many other spots from these teams that are deserving, like Texas and Vanderbilt right there, and Notre Dame. At least it would be less common. And then of course, Notre Dame, if they don't join a conference, you would still have benefit to them, because then they really just would need to stay within the top 16, which I think would be doable. You wouldn't have the auto buys for the conference championships. I'm not proposing that. So I'm saying the same like ranking system, but just make sure those get in. I think that's probably going to happen, or something in that form. We'll see kind of how it plays out. And then also, if you're somebody that's listening and is like, well, what happens in 3 years when the Big Ten's terrible and, the ACC's loaded? Like, that's not fair. Well, then why don't we have a, 2-year meeting in a college football playoff that they reevaluate the format every like 2 years on if we need to make adjustments on conferences, and just have like a body that would oversee that would, recommend saying, all right, we think we want to take one from the Big Ten and we want to add one to the ACC, or take one from the at large and give it to the ACC. I don't know. That there's really, it can't get much more like worse than it is right now. So I'm just throwing things out there, but it does seem like it's going to be going to 16. It's, at the same time, it's unfortunate because we all love the importance of all the games. Conference championship games, that's got to be figured out. Like, that just doesn't make sense. We actually didn't even talk about this, but Virginia moved back 2 spots. So I was kind of laughing at this because Arizona and Michigan, 2 random 9-3 teams, randomly moved up 2 spots this week because they moved UVA back. And I'm thinking to myself, so what if this was the playoff bubble? Like, and then what are we then? So Arizona and Michigan, who did absolutely nothing, who would just benefit because UVA lost. Like, it didn't make sense. And I'm not saying the game, you shouldn't be punished, but you can't penalize one team and not the other. That's kind of the main issue with it. So I don't know why. I swear, and this is my guess, I think they moved Virginia back 2 spots because they were like, BYU can't be the only team we move back. So they kind of just, they decided they were going with Miami to head. They had to come up with the reason to flip BYU. And then UVA, they're like, well, let's move them back too also, so we could say, yeah, we looked at some of these teams. I don't know. There's some of my initial thoughts, but definitely I think we're going to 16. I think this was probably the last, push towards that. It's just, what type of form are we going to see it in? Will there be auto bids and buys and that type of stuff?
Yeah, no, I think 16 obviously would be better. And then it's just, when it's going to stop, but hopefully, like you said, at 16. And with the conference championships, I think you're 100% right. And this is what we were trying to say last week. Like, what are we quantifying it as? But then the committee's like, well, it depends what conference it is. And it depends what team you are. Because like you said, Virginia, BYU got moved back, but then Ohio State and Alabama really didn't get penalized. So you could clearly see there's some differentiating things and factors here. It's not all equal and consistent. And that's some right. It's an extra game, but it's not really a benefit sometimes. And everyone wants to bang on Notre Dame. Oh, they're never have to worry about that, and they're never going to be in a conference championship. There's a lot of other teams that don't play. There's only 2 teams in each conference, so there's a lot of teams like Miami that didn't play but benefited from it. So don't just rag on one team. There's a lot of other teams that benefit from not playing in the conference championship. I mentioned Texas A&M. I mentioned Ole Miss. I think if Ole Miss would have played in it and lost, they might have been booted out. So it really just depends on who you are. Like, it's annoying. But so I think conference championships need to go away. I think that needs to be consistent with this expansion or with a change in the playoff. And then, like you said, with the 16 team, I think you're right. With the 4-4, 2-2, like wild cards, I think like that's a good start. I think that's a good way to do it, and give some precedent to the SEC and Big Ten. Like you said, if they change or get better, which I don't think it even will because of how negatively trending the ACC and Big 12 are. We'll get to that in a little bit. But this was my point, and I've been talking about it all year, Case, and I know I mentioned it to you, but now with the spread of the transfer portal, all these teams are kind of getting better, and there's not really like a Georgia team that has like 3 guys deep that are amazing and they're way above. And the example was this weekend with Ohio State. Everybody thought Ohio State's way, way better. They're not really that far off from Indiana, which is crazy. So now if you're spreading out the talent and a lot of teams have more chances and more parity, which is good for the sport, I think you're seeing it in the NFL as well, but then you have to now give more chances to teams. So in the past, the 14 playoff maybe worked because there really was only 4 or 5 teams that are really dominant and could really compete against each other. Now, with all the losses and all the back and forth, you're seeing that Notre Dame that got left out, Texas, Vanderbilt, and maybe even BYU, maybe in the right matchup and stuff, they can maybe make a run and get to the championship. Like Notre Dame was an 8 seed last year. Penn State was the 5 or 6 or 7 and made a run. So you can't just discredit it. You have to change now with the landscape of college football, spreading out the talent. There's a lot more parity. There's a lot more teams. Well, then you got to expand your field and have more teams to win it. I think we can honestly all agree that after the 16th team, quote unquote, this year, then it kind of drops off. And then it's kind of, but in the 14 playoff, you felt like they were missing some teams at 5, 6, 7 that maybe could have made a run. Then you go to 12 now, and it's like, okay, well, now maybe 13, 14, 15. But I think we could all agree once you get to 17, 18, 19, 20, those teams, like Iowa's not making a run. Michigan's not making a run, for it. So I think they just a little bit more to give teams because the talent pool and these teams are getting a lot better in the middle. And there's just a lot more teams that can make a run. But yeah, it's just going to be funny to look back to see exactly where we go the next couple of years and be like, oh, so JMU and Tulane made it, but Notre Dame, Texas, and Vanderbilt were left out. Like, it's just going to be laughable to look back on.
Well, that's the biggest takeaway is that those kind of two are in, and then you have Notre Dame, Texas, Vanderbilt, BYU kind of just all sitting out. It's like, well, we all know, we'd take any of those four over James Madison and Tulane, So all that being said, we do have a playoff. We do have the 12. Not the best first round games by any means, and largely because of the group of 5 situation. Like, we got probably the best game, which is Miami and A&M, is at noon, which was an unfortunate time slot for them on Saturday. And then we got those 2 group of 5 games, James Madison going to Oregon. We got the other one, which is Tulane going to Ole Miss. I think it's wide open, basically. The Alabama-Oklahoma game, it's cool. Yeah, it's a rematch, but that doesn't blow me away either. I'm not that excited for that game. I feel like I should be more winner that plays Indiana. Interested to hear, do you have any kind of team that you like who you think might, if you had to put an odds on to win the championship or might have an easier path? It definitely is not as obvious because you don't have the Boise State with the bye. So there's all these, second round teams with the bye. They kind of all deserve it. They're all pretty good, definitely, I think top 4, top 5 teams. Right off the bat, I think it's so wide open. Obviously, minus James Madison and Tulane, I could see any of these other teams winning at least a game or 2. Maybe not the whole thing. Maybe not Miami. I don't, think they could, compete and beat Ohio State and make a run late and beat Georgia. But maybe they could pick off A&M and then lose to Ohio State. And I don't know. Maybe Ole Miss. I think they could maybe upset Georgia in the second round. They could make a run. Seems pretty wide open. And right now with Alabama, leaking oil, I'm Indiana could find themselves making a run. I mean, they're really good. They're number 1 in the country. So it seems it's anybody's crown for the taking right now.
No, I would agree. It's very open. Yeah. Now pivoting to now what we actually got. Now we're going to be betting on these games and looking forward. But one team that I'm eyeing up, and I really did like them going into the SEC championship, is Georgia. And they looked the part. They're just playing some really good football. I think that defense is really coming into form, and I thought they got a pretty good seed. I think that 2-3 seed was actually, I think, the spot you want to be in. So because of the Ole Miss, like you said, with losing the coach, they're still very talented, but that's probably the team you'd want to face in the fact of it. So they'd get them in the next matchup. And then it would be an Ohio State in the semifinal, which would definitely be the biggest roadblock. But I just think Georgia's playing some really good football right now. The offense has taken a little bit of a hit, but I still trust them to figure that out. They still, could do enough on offense, but we were really worried about that defense. But I don't know what they did differently. It looks like they're rushing the passer more, maybe getting a little more exotic with some of their looks and stuff. But they've been shutting teams down the last couple of weeks of the season. So they're hitting really hard. They're looking fast. So Georgia's one of the teams that I keep my eye on. I think they were plus 650, 700. Didn't really pull a trigger. I'm not a big futures guy in general, too. But then one team that I did place a little small future a couple of weeks ago with Notre Dame, that ticket is obviously gone, but was Oregon. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago, but I do think Oregon's path is not terrible. You talk about the JMU game, should be a win. Can they cover the spread? We'll break that down. That'll be a different story. But then you'll get a possible rematch with Indiana, and that game was very close, back and forth. And I think Oregon is a team that kind of people forgot about. And they had a lot of injuries during the season and late in the season. Now you get a 2-3 week break. You should get a lot of those guys back. They'll have a little revenge on their mind. Now kind of opposite from Ohio State after the big Michigan win. Well, now Indiana has to deal with a big win and feeling great about themselves. And that's obviously the biggest win they've ever had in program history. So it's not like they have to play right now next week, but it's still going to be, how are they going to respond to that now with a little time off and stuff? So I think Oregon, if they could get past that Indiana game, if they get there, pick them off, then you'll be looking at, or I think Texas Tech is also in their line of sight, which again, that wouldn't be terrible. Like I wouldn't mind playing Texas Tech, honestly, at this moment. They're not too scary. Defense is really good, but they're definitely beatable. So you stay away from Georgia and Ohio State. You're kind of on that top side. And I think Oregon can maybe make some room. So I'm kind of looking at those two teams' case to make some noise here. And I'm just, I think you're 100% right. It's going to be wide open and going to be a fun playoff, I think, back and forth with all these games once we get past some of these group of 5 games in the first round. But what do you think the Oklahoma-Alabama total is going to be, like 28.5? Like I see 0 points being scored in that game.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Alabama, they've not looked good. I mean, I was so disappointed in them yesterday, this weekend in the SEC championship. They offensively was bad. I have really no faith in them. And even the winner of that game, like that's going to be interesting just to see them play Indiana. Like you're going to have a SEC, I don't want to say middle SEC team, like high end, like they definitely a better team, but what will that look like against the, Big Ten champion now in Indiana? And that'll be in the Rose Bowl. So that's going to be a great scene for them. Also could have a scenario where we have Ohio State and Indiana refacing for a rematch in the national championship. That's probably be one of the most exciting, that we could get is if they run the table and it's set up the way the brackets are, since we don't have the, auto buys with the conference championships, that they're set up. They each have the bye. They could each play each other. But I do agree that I think Georgia's probably playing like they're playing the best football they have all year. And I think yesterday was just proof of that, controlling Alabama like they did. A&M, I don't know, like A&M, which was a team that we were kind of high on for most of the year, loses to Texas. Then we look back at their schedule and realize they played the whole, bottom half of their schedule in the SEC, the bottom of the conference. So that game against Miami is going to be intriguing. There's a ton of uncertainty, but I like your Georgia pick. I do like that. I'd like to see. I think Indiana, Ohio State are for real. I think there's definitely a scenario where they meet each other again. And I would also put the odds for an upset at nearly 0 for Tulane and James Madison. Like they are that those digits, like we should not be wasting our time with these games. I'm sorry, but we can't be having them playing and then the others just sitting at home.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Texas A&M too. That's a fascinating team, and I think a lot of eyeballs will be on that game at noon Eastern against Miami for obvious reasons. But I think you're 100% right. What is this Texas A&M team? Because they haven't looked great against the bottom half, but we know the top end and we know the talent. We know if they could get all things clicking, they really could be a top 5 team, but you don't know what you're going to get. So you're at home, first game. Hopefully you look good in that game. So let's see how they look. With these huge breaks now, you should be getting more healthy, should be getting a lot of rest. So there's really no, like situational spots like we like to look at during the season or even in the conference championships last week. All motivation is there. Everybody should be fully healthy unless you're completely out with a season-ending injury. So it's going to be fun to finally have some clean games, some, full motivation. Everybody's looking to win. There's not, certain aspects of it like that. And one team I'm looking to sell a little bit is Texas Tech. And this will lead me into a little hypothetical I wanted to run with you here, Case. But Texas Tech, I thought it was a very impressive win against BYU. Defense is legit, but I'm just still not sold on the offense overall. But I think that could be a team that with one of the buys out of the top 4 teams, I could see maybe getting picked off and being one and done, like some of those teams last year that we thought really shouldn't have gotten those buys. And I think all of them got upset, I think, in the first round or something last year. So I'd be looking to fade Texas Tech depending on who they get. I think it would be Oregon. I don't have the bracket up in front of me, but I would lean Oregon in that game. But lastly, on the Notre Dame saga, and this is just one thing I wanted to touch base on with them joining conference, and I've been hearing this my entire life. And my theory is I want them to join a conference because it actually might be easier than what they're currently doing right now. So let me run you through, Case, Texas Tech and Ohio State's schedule. And I want you to say what you think this year's Notre Dame team, their record would have been. So everybody wants to say, oh, join a conference. Oh, you guys are pussies, like all this stuff. I think some of these schedules are a lot easier than what Notre Dame had to play the last couple of years, but people just don't want to admit it. So let's run through this gauntlet of the big bad Big 12. And this was a team that was calling out Notre Dame and saying they could schedule whatever they want and they play a soft schedule. So this was Texas Tech's big bad schedule, Case. Let's see how many wins you think Notre Dame would get. Arkansas Pine Bluff, Kent State, Oregon State, Utah, Houston, Kansas, Arizona State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, BYU, UCF, West Virginia. So if you were to round that out, Case, where would you put Notre Dame in that schedule if they had Texas Tech schedule?
Yeah, I would probably say Notre Dame would run the table, or maybe just maybe just drop one of them, like Texas Tech.
Right. So at worst, 11-1, 12-0,
Yeah.
probably be in the conference championship. And people do forget in the COVID season, it was a weird season, but Notre Dame did officially join the ACC, and they went 9-0 and played Clemson in the ACC championship that year. So that's why I'm not afraid. I hope they do it. I don't care what conference it is, but I hope they do join one just to shut everybody up and prove it. And let's just run another example here, Case, with Ohio State's schedule. That was a gauntlet early on here. Obviously, the Texas game to start. Now you're getting Texas at home against Arch Manning in his first start, and we know how horrendous he looked there. And then you got Grambling State, Ohio, Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, Michigan.
Yeah, I'd say probably no worse than 10-2.
So the point is, some of these teams that love to brag in their conferences and that, they're like join a conference, maybe look at your own schedule and how you schedule some of these teams and get at the top. And I think Texas Tech is way more of that versus Ohio State, but I think both of them were kind of soft. And I think, they want to complain, the conferences are so hard to play year in and year out. Some of these teams, your conference is not as good as you think. And Notre Dame's been playing a hybrid ACC schedule, and we know the ACC is not that good, and they've been running through them. They really haven't had problems with it, except for the Miami game, the first game of the season. But just a little something I wanted to throw out there for the viewers that love to throw their conference thing around. And I know some other teams have harder schedules. I pick these two, but they're two teams that are power rated or similar to Notre Dame. And I'm just thinking, what would Notre Dame do if they had these schedules? Oh, they probably wouldn't be at the number 12 or 13 spot and fighting for their lives. So just a little something I want to throw out there for all of our viewers there, Case.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And I think I've said Notre Dame should be in a conference for a long time. And I don't really think it's because, like you said, it's any really harder in a conference. I do think it could be to Notre Dame's benefit. I think it would just be helpful for the fairness and the across the board, same, everybody plays the same type of schedule, just like I was an advocate for, the SEC moving from 8 games to 9 games. And they all bitched about that. But at the end of the day, it's maybe the SEC is a little bit tougher, but regardless, then you're still playing you could schedule a fourth cupcake team while, the Big Ten has to play an in-conference game late in the season. I mean, even teams like, Minnesota or like Wisconsin are kind of pushovers right now. I don't think any team I think they'd rather go, play whatever Temple or something that week, like kind of treat it like a bye week. Instead, you kind of have to prep that week. And, it is completely different with how the SEC handled their schedule in the Big Ten. So I think it'd be beneficial really for Notre Dame to join a conference for them. And I think the rest of college football too, just to have that uniformity kind of across the board. I don't know if it will happen. I don't know how that works with, their current, deal. And I know they have that deal with NBC and, which conference would they join and all of this. But no, I do agree. The only pushback Paisley at all on the schedule thing would be, I guess, the scenario of BYU, because their only 2 losses were, they went 11-1 with the loss to Texas Tech, and then of course lost again. But and they're also out. But for sure, Notre Dame would be, I'm sure, 11-1 at worst with that schedule too. So, but yeah, totally agree.
And that's a great point with BYU, because someone brought this up. They were independent a couple of years ago. They just joined the Big 12 in every sport. And someone said that, everyone was saying, we got to join a conference. BYU did. And like you said, they kind of got screwed over by their conference for joining it. So it's just, you could go either way. And I don't get involved on the comments section online. I just like to look and see, but you could be arguing until you're blue in the face. And I just hate when arguing and politicking is the main factor of how we decide this. We need to have something, like you said, unity all across the board. I agree with your SEC take. Why do they get to play 8? Now they're moving to 9. Now they're complaining, stuff like that. So we hopefully should find a uniform body for everybody to be a little more fairness, because it is. Everyone's just kind of doing their own thing, and no other sport does this. So it is very unique. But yeah, hopefully there could be some big overall changes. But yeah, I think hopefully they could strip a lot of things down here. And I'm hoping Notre Dame joins the conference. I really do. Like you said, I think it could be very beneficial for them, maybe not financially, but I think it would just level the playing field and they could just be on the same level as everyone else. And then you could have no gripes and then you could have no arguments and then it would all be fair. And then hopefully it would just give a little more consistency to the sport.
The Big Ten should remove Purdue and then add Notre Dame. Is what they
I
should
think
do.
that'd be fine.
Or Rutgers. I'm fine with removing Rutgers, but
Rutgers, yeah, they might just need to get rid of that college in general because every sport they put out there is not good. So
yeah. All right. So on top of that, we got the whole playoff stuff. We're probably going to be doing, I'd say, another podcast either later this week or maybe this weekend. We'll have to see how it all looks, but we are going to break down each of the first round games. We're going to do the spreads like we normally do, have some picks. We also got bowl season, of course, upon us, kind of being drowned out here in all the weeds with all that. Really quick, I'm just going to run through, and Paisley, you don't have to run through yours. I had some of the preseason picks. I'm not going to go through all of them because it'd take forever, and also some of them are really embarrassing. But I'm just going to go through my best conference bet in each of them really quickly. So I had this is a bad one: Indiana under 8.5 wins. Totally whiffed on that one. No hard feelings for them, but it gets better. Best conference bet in the SEC, I had Florida under 7.5 wins. Cash that one. Big 12, I had Kansas State to make the playoff. Wrong, did not make the playoff. Didn't really compete, although they got some momentum in late October, but nonetheless, nothing there. ACC, Pitt over 6.5 wins. Cash that one. So 2-2 on the best conference bets. Group of 5, here we go. James Madison to make the playoff and to win the Sun Belt. Shouldn't have made the playoff, but look, they got in. I know they weren't the true one of group of 5 team because we know Tulane got in, but we'll take it. I'm going to count that one. They're in, win the Sun Belt. So 3-2 on the conference stuff. Although my boldest take of the year, Paisley, we struck out both of us here. You had Ohio State to miss the playoffs, and I had Nebraska to make the playoffs. So that was a tough one, both at probably extraordinary odds at the time. But I'd say overall, with the addition of James Madison, my preseason on the bets were okay for kind of having no idea on how these conferences or teams would shape up.
yeah, no, I think it's fun to look back, and I got mine pulled up here, Case, too.
Nice.
So appreciate you going through yours there, and I'll share some embarrassing ones myself. And we'll start with PSU over Michigan in the Big Ten title game. Penn State obviously did not live up to that, unfortunately, as some of you know. My surprise team was Michigan and USC, which I thought, did okay, like wasn't terrible. Yeah. And then my disappointing teams were Ohio State and Oregon, which obviously was not close. I was really banking on them having bad seasons, so really got the Big Ten wrong. But I did get UCLA under 5.5 wins, and they only had 3 wins on the year, so just double check that one. My surprise team at the SEC was Oklahoma, which I thought was kind of right. And my disappointing teams was South Carolina and Ole Miss. So I think I got the South Carolina one right. I also had Alabama to win the title 10-1, which is still live. So, am I feeling confident if I'm holding that ticket? No, but it's still live there. Big 12, I had Arizona State over TCU. Arizona State really just a disappointing year from what they brought back and everything. Then my surprise team, Houston, Utah. Houston, actually, I thought had a pretty good year, so I thought I got a decent call there. And Colorado, disappointing team. That team has fallen off the map, and they might be vanished forever, so that might be an absolute one-hit wonder for Colorado. Did have West Virginia under 5.5 wins, which I also think cash too, which I did not play into these myself, so maybe I got to start playing some of these next year, Case. ACC had Georgia Tech, Louisville. That was just a crapshoot. Had Clemson over Louisville in the championship game. Obviously, it didn't work out. My disappointing team was Syracuse. That might be my best call of the season, maybe. I did call out Syracuse being bad. I think their win total was like 6 or 7, actually, and they completely fell off the map. The Cal under 5.5 wins, I think, also cashed too. So if you took to some of the season-long things, I think that was good. My surprise teams out of the group of 5, I think I hit 2, didn't hit 2. I had UTSA and JMU. I think we were both on JMU, so if you like that early in the season, we did help you out there. But I did have Buffalo and Air Force, and they had terrible season, so a couple of whiffs there. My disappointing team, I had Army, which didn't have a lot of expectations, but they definitely maybe disappointed. And Kent State, which I do apologize to the Flash. I think they had a lot better season than what we were projecting there. And then maybe the best bet of the season, easily cashing, North Texas over 6.5 wins. So really liking the season-long things there. But North Texas, even though they they disappointed us in their two biggest games of the year. Case they did win us a lot of money week in and week out, so they still hold a special place in my heart, and I'll be rooting for that coach going to Oklahoma State, hopefully reviving the program there. But North Texas over 6.5 wins. I'll take that one to the bank.
Yeah, I'd say overall pretty strong. Honestly, I think that's pretty good on for preseason, and it'd be interesting to see if you placed each of them what the units would be. But I imagine it would be plus odds. I know all of them weren't necessarily bets, on the just surprise teams and some of the stuff that's more discretionary. But I'd say overall not too bad. And also, Paisley, you reminded me of one thing when you mentioned Army. I guess we could kind of talk about. We got, of course, Army Navy coming up next Saturday in Baltimore. Navy's -6, 7-1. That would have been a great surprise team to pick. I know a lot of people in the preseason were kind of low on them. Almost won the American. I mean, they made things really interesting at the end. They ended up going 7-1. I imagine Navy will win this game, but I'll probably just pick Army because I swear at all the opposites, these two teams, it's such a big game rivalry that it seems like whoever's supposed to win usually ends up falling short. But I think that's the same day as the Heisman Trophy. But yeah, any thoughts on Army Navy? I know this game you must really dislike. I know you're kind of against both schools here.
Yeah, I guess I have to pick one of them. I guess I wish I wish I could not, but love the troops out there. If it's a first time listener, it's all jokes. But I'm with you though. I kind of like Army. I always just kind of lean to the dog here because it is so close. And like you said, I feel like always the teams that's favored always like comes up short. So maybe even a little money line if you want to get a little fun with it. I was surprised it was at 6.5. I thought it'd be around 3-4, but I feel like they always put it up every year because they're going off of metrics from playing different teams. But obviously these teams know each other very, very well. Usually it's very tightly contested games. So yeah, I always look to the underdog here, and I'll gladly take Army +6, take them on the money line, and then not sure on the total there, but I always just love taking an over for some reason. 49.5 or
39.
Okay, I was going to say 39. I might take the over as well. I always like taking it. It's a weird thing. There's not a lot of points scored, but it's always exhilarating when they finally get into the end zone and some crazy stuff happens and stuff like that. But yeah, let's go Army. I think we're both backing them going into next week.
Well, that's it. All right, might as well close out. I'm not going to say one final time because I'm sure we'll do it maybe at the end of the playoff or during the playoff. We'll do another winners and losers. And I think we did one of the entire year actually at the end of the season. So we'll hold out for that one. But winners and losers of the last 7 days, Mr. Paisley, who is your, let's see, we'll go loser. We'll start with the losers.
My loser case is the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And now you're probably thinking, why is it the Pop-Tarts Bowl? Now, that is one of our favorite bowls of the year. I can't wait to watch it. The theatrics are always great. I think there's going to be 6 live Pop-Tarts this year, so they're really up in the game here. But I think that is projected what the bowl Notre Dame was supposed to play in, actually. And they were projected to play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I forget who against, and then they opted out, obviously, right after the rankings got released. So that would have been my dream scenario, seeing my Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, my favorite bowl out there. But now we lose that opportunity. I'm not sure who's going to fill in there. I'll still be watching. It's my favorite bowl of the season. But the Pop-Tarts Bowl really left out on a massive deal there with Notre Dame opting out potentially.
Yeah, that was a great pick, and it kind of fits mine. But it's BYU actually, so it's BYU and Georgia.
Yeah, it would have been Notre Dame BYU.
Yeah. Because Notre Dame opt out. Great loser of the week. Mine is I had bowl games actually as my loser of the week. Really, because we see how it plays out and we see how it's been going the last few years, but. The college football playoff is just, it's changing everything. NIL, it's between the playoff and NIL. I think it's both things and the calendar with the portal. So it's kind of the 3 things, but we all know they're kind of connected in the one. It's bowl games. You got Notre Dame opting out, which is disappointing, of course, but it's not just them, by the way. It's Iowa State, Kansas State, Rutgers, who's 5-7, but got offered because of all the other opts out. Baylor, Auburn, Florida State, UCF. So a whole list of teams. There's probably more. I just kind of wrote down a few that I saw. It's disappointing because it's fun. It's something that was a part of college football forever, and clearly the committee, or not the committee, but the playoff in general is just kind of changing that in NIL. And I don't know what we're going to do. I feel like we're getting to the point where we're seeing the very end of it, or at least going to have some new variation. Penn State's going to the Pinstripe Bowl. They're playing Clemson. I'm actually excited for that. It's like the top the preseason top 5 national championship game, or preseason top 5 bowl, I'll call it. So that one's going to be exciting. It's probably one of them out of all of them that might be one of the better ones, because I think both teams will want to win. I don't know who's going to play or which players, but I get why teams are opting out. I do get it, especially with the portal for players, but also for teams not wanting to put their product on the field to allow other teams to recruit their players. I mean, that goes on, and they don't want to let that happen. So, but it is, all in all, it's the way we have it, and it's got to be bowl games with all these opt-outs and teams opting out. Definitely disappointing, but man, really disappointed also for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It would have been great to see Notre Dame and BYU face off there.
Yeah, I was thinking about just putting bowl games in general too, Case. It's just been slowly deteriorating every year, and it's just getting worse and worse. So that's something I think me and you, we loved watching bowl games growing up. It was a big staple of the college football season, and it was so much fun to just have games on every day of the week, and having the weird bowls and having these teams, because these matchups don't really happen, like a Penn State and Clemson. I think it'd be fun. So I hate seeing it. I do hate seeing the bowl games disappear, but I think, like you said, I think we're just going towards a time where it might just end all bowl games, or just maybe that could be the group of 5s thing. Maybe they just do bowl games and have a little tournament of their own, like you said, or have the Pop-Tarts Bowl be like the College Football Playoff National Championship. And maybe that's what you build your whole season towards. So we'll go there. And then also along the lines, I'll just go right into the winner here. I'm going to go Duke. I'm going to go Duke Blue Devils. They are my winner for hopefully destroying the entire college football committee, the playoff system, everything else. I think this was a nightmare situation that when they let them into the ACC championship, and they're like, well, they're probably not going to win it. And then they win it. And now you have that, just totally embarrassing for the ACC. They look like absolute jokes and frauds there. But really tough conference, and it's hard to play in conferences. But Duke is my winner to hopefully put the bombshell on. And I called it last week, Case. I said they could be the most influential team going into conference championship weekend. They did it. They almost blew it. That was a crazy ending to the game, but they got the nice score in overtime and then the interception on the trick play. So I was happy for the Duke Blue Devils there. And I think they really did just kill the 12-team playoff. Hopefully the committee, hopefully how we rank these teams and all this stuff. So got to give Duke a big shout out, depending on what happens maybe here in the offseason and going forward. But give Manny Diaz some credit there, winning it at 8-5 for the conference. So Duke Blue Devils, a basketball school, getting a nice ACC championship before the Miami Hurricanes have in the last couple of years. So just want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, that is crazy. And that's a good winner, Duke, not for winning the ACC, but for potentially causing a seismic shift here in how we do things. Also, I do think, if Duke and James Madison played, I think Duke would probably win the game, which is also disturbing that we have James Madison in and the group of 5 of getting 2 teams. And I have a winner. I had a winner/loser, and that's the group of 5, because I don't know if they should be really celebrating this. Good for them. They have their 2 teams in, but we got give them their own tournament. Have the Pop-Tarts Bowl, their championship, change it. I like that idea, actually. That's a good one. So good for them. But my true winner is Indiana, of course, just for winning the Big Ten. I am rooting against Indiana. I do not want them to win the national championship as a Penn State fan. It would kill me to see that team not because I hate Indiana by any means, but just knowing the fact that Penn State had infinite more resources over the last several years, and the quick rise, and when Penn State's been clawing their way at one for decades, and all these other schools too. It's not just Penn State. I'm sure there's, dozens of schools in similar, arguments. I mean, Texas, USC, all these teams. So, yeah. But they're my winner this week, but it stops now. I will not be supporting them in the playoff. I hope they, play well. I hope they are competitive and we get some entertainment, but they're my winner of the week, but I will not be rooting for them. Just throwing that out there.
No, that's a great point you said there, Case. I didn't even think of that, but it'll probably piss off a lot of teams. And you could also go on the flip side that now a lot of these teams are going to be expecting to do that in their first or second year they get a head coach. So they could really screw up expectations for teams across the countries, and it's going to really piss off a lot of teams. So Curt Cignetti, he's a polarizing figure, but if he gets a national championship, he's going to be unbearable. And I think the expectation is going to be we'll just do what Indiana did. But I got to give with you a lot of credit for Indiana for what they did, from being literally the worst team in college football to now number 1. It truly is remarkable, but not very easy to repeat. So maybe just put a warning label out there to all
Yep.
these new coaches and all these new
That's right.
programs.
And even their own internal expectations for Indiana over the next 5 years. Will they maintain
Right.
or will they take a dip? I
True.
mean, that's going to be interesting to watch. But all right, not too bad. Hour 10. We'll be back. Not sure when, maybe later this week, maybe this weekend. We'll talk about the calendar and we'll post it on X. So make sure you're following our posts. We'll be making picks. We're going to be doing something for the playoff itself against the spread. So we will see you guys later.